Joining us now is the executive editor at the American Prospect, the one and only David Dayen. Great to see you, David.
Good to be here.
First of all, I have to just say that I cannot say enough what great work you guys do over the American Prospect. We really lean on it in the show. You guys do in-depth analysis that nobody seems to, dig into the numbers the way that you guys do. So I just want to applaud you for the work that you're doing, first and foremost. But second of all, we'll get to the news here. Unexpectedly, this morning, we have a new report that says that the U.S. economy, the GDP, shrank at a 1.4% annual rate in the first quarter. That is according to the Commerce Department. That is its first contraction since early in the pandemic. Just the news just came out, so I know you're just sorting through it as we are, but what do you make of these numbers?
Yeah, I think the expectation was for pretty slow growth, for something around 1%. So this is a surprise to the downside. I think there are a couple factors. Number one, the first quarter we had Omicron, which really at the beginning of the year was a significant, lead weight on the economy. And then for the last month, you had the war in Ukraine and what that did to gas prices. And I think overall you're seeing the effects of inflation on consumer spending. But also, my understanding is that a lot of this has to do with inventory reductions.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, there's a weird thing about GDP where if you end up having a lot of buildup of inventory, that kind of counts as part of your gross domestic product because it's sitting there in a warehouse. And if you have less, then it counts less. So sometimes GDP is a little noisy as that goes. And this is also the first advance estimate, and we'll get a more fine-grained understanding of it. And it could change from there, but sometimes you get these weird swings because of inventory.
So the other one here is about exports, David, which also links back to what we were going to be talking about with you. So why are our exports contracting and our trade deficit ballooning? Because that also seems to be a significant part of the reduction here in GDP.
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, as demand has increased for goods, just basic goods, necessities, and durable goods like furniture or washing machines or whatever, you almost can see it like, okay, we don't make any of that stuff. So if the demand increases, the trade deficit is going to increase. People are going to eat the same amount of food. Agriculture is largely our biggest export. So unless people are consuming massive amounts of food, that's going to stay pretty even. But if people are consuming more durable items, just more stuff, that's going to come in from overseas. So that's one way to think about it.
So David, you had a great piece kind of evaluating where we are in terms of the supply chain crisis, where we are in terms of, is inflation just continuing to go up and up and up? Are there any signs of that abating in any sectors? Let's go ahead and put this tear sheet up on the screen. It says supply chains are easing, or they're not. Our system is so unstable that we could be seeing endless waves of supply dysfunction with dangerous impacts on the economy. You point to the fact that you've got variables pointing in sort of every direction that enable you to look at this a number of different ways. And you also talk about something called the bullwhip effect, which is what could cause us sort of careening from one problem to another problem back and forth. Can you just break some of that down for us?
Yeah, the bullwhip effect is this sort of standard understanding of supply chains where it takes time from when you order something, if you're a retailer, to it actually getting to you. And conditions could change in that time period. And that's the bullwhip. It's the time for the whip to crack and then, move back and straighten out again. So, for example, a lot of companies fearing that they're not going to be able to get all of their supply, but they might be able to get some of it. They over-ordered or double-ordered in the past 6 months, hoping that they'd get something that they'd have to be able to sell. And by the time they actually start getting that stuff, then the demand has shrunk because of inflation. And there's now, you've gone from shortage to glut. And there was a sense, especially in the beginning of April, I mean, the GDP number comes out now, and we're a month into beyond where the GDP is measuring. So April in particular, you started to see this softening in freight, particularly trucking, where there just weren't as many orders being asked to move goods and things like that. And you're seeing what has been described by some experts as a recession in trucking. And that's because of lower consumer spending, right? But the goods are already on the way by the time we get the lower consumer spending. Right. And so you could end up with this glut from these retailers that have a bunch of inventory they can't sell. Now that's like sort of, happening it's kind of happening in real time. But the other part of this that cuts against that whole concept is the fact that Shanghai has been locked down for 3 weeks, and now we're seeing Beijing potentially going into lockdown. Shanghai is more important as manufacturing goes because it's more of a hub. You could see, you have factories that have been shut down for a month, and for basic items, for things that people just ordinarily consume, that's going to create shortages, and it could create shortages of component parts for manufacturing in other parts of the world. And so the bullwhip is going to whip back, right? I mean, you have this shortage, you went to glut, and now you might go back to shortage. And it's just an indicator of the essential instability of the way that our commerce and logistics systems work right now.
Well, that's the point, is none of this has to be built that way. It's just that, this micro thin ability to have a slightly higher profit margin trumped any sort of focus on resiliency that would keep us from careening from crisis to crisis to crisis and having such fragility built in, which is really what's been exposed over the past couple of years. David, I'm also wondering, are we seeing impacts from the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates and indicating they're going to do that at least the same pace, potentially an even more accelerated pace, and also indicating that they're planning to unload assets from their balance sheet at a pretty good clip as well. Are we seeing an impact from that policy play out here too?
I think not direct effects yet, because they've only raised a quarter point at this point. There's an expectation of a half point or maybe even a 0.75 point rise in May. But expectations are trending in that direction, and that particularly comes through the channel of mortgages. Mortgage rates are over 5%, and so it costs a lot more to buy a home, and we're starting to see that play out in some softening of housing markets. But to get back to your point, I think there's one very key thing that you can say about the Federal Reserve's intention to increase these interest rates to break the back of inflation. And that's to ask the question, what are increased interest rates? How are they going to end the lockdown in Shanghai? How are they going to stop the 500 ships that are currently off the coast of Shanghai Harbor? How are they going to shrink that number? They're not. I mean, we have a supply problem, and the Fed is targeting demand, essentially, is the issue to me. And I think what we've seen is not only the chaos that can arise from a pandemic, but the fact that we're in kind of a world where there are these threats to supply shocks at every turn. I mean, the war in Ukraine has been a much bigger spur, particularly on food prices. Wheat being a very major commodity export out of Ukraine. We've seen that be a much bigger deal, and of course oil. Than what we saw, in the 2 years leading up to the pandemic. Climate issues have been periodically problems for supply. Last year in China, the Yangtze River flooding led to a lot of production delays. A heat wave led, because of the way in which China's energy sector goes, led to shutdowns at factories of electricity for several weeks. And that led to shutdowns. We've seen like freak fires. There was a fire in Japan that reduced a lot of semiconductor capacity. And then there was a fire early this year in Berlin at the factory that makes the machines that make semiconductors.
Oh, Jesus.
Right? So, I mean, we've been able to make the very long intermediated supply chains work work to the extent, not really for workers, but at least for cheap prices for a long time. But I feel like the threats to this are rising. The hidden risks that this kind of system draws out have risen over the last several years, whether it's through more political unrest, climate and extreme weather events, and now a pandemic. And I think it demands a rethink of this system.
Yeah, I think that we are all living through that in real time. David, thank you so much for breaking it down. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And I'll just reiterate it one more time. Look, I mean, you know, when the Washington Post and them were coming after me, and by extension you, by demeaning us.
Definitely,
and, you know, denigrating
and
our
I would
show.
associate myself with such a villainous character as yourself.
All I could think about was, thank God that we have you guys, our audience, our supporters, and the premium subs. By building the business the way that we did, it makes it so that we can actually stand up to them. So thank you all so much for your support at this time. It really does mean more than you can ever know. We really appreciate it. And, you know, look, for your hard-earned money, we are using it as best as we possibly can. We've got all these new partnerships. We've got Jordan Sheridan, who's on the ground. We're just talking to him. He's got a new place he's going to be visiting, traveling for us, got an exclusive footage. We're going to have a highlight reel of all of his interviews. It's going to drop over the weekend. Marshall's been doing great interviews. Kyle's clips have been doing great as well. We've got Maximilian Alvarez. Matt Stoller's coming into the studio right whenever we're done today to film something new for all of you. James Lee's video is fantastic. So all of it is just geared towards how can we give you the best possible value for your money. Now we've got the newsletter going as well, a written description of everything we talk about in the show. So we're just going to keep on building here, guys. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, we have never, I think, been more grateful for you all because it does provide you peace of mind. Like the Washington Post thing is a pain in the ass, and it's not cost-free because the more that we get pushed down of like mainstream respectability, obviously, you know, that determines our treatment with the algorithm, all those sorts of things. But it really does give you peace of mind that, you know, we're going to be fine. And we know you guys are going to back us up and back Saagar up. So we have never been more grateful. We love you guys. We got a lot of great content to post for you this weekend. So make sure you watch out for that. And we'll see you back for a full show on Monday. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.